Hey, I'm going to just walk through a basic setup of the configuration for a BeeCorder. Let me just get started here. So this is basically an unconfigured BeeCorder. The battery is an 18650 right now. It could be different. Two temperature humidity sensors and the weight sensor. So right now there are no other buttons or switches, so only plugging in the battery will basically cause the ESP8266 to go out and search for a Wi-Fi connection, and if it doesn't find one, it will set up its own AP and host a web page. So what you will find is a new Wi-Fi AP, so you can go onto your Android or other tablet or laptop and select after maybe 30 seconds or so, you will see something called a BeeCorder show up as an access point. So you connect to that, and this first goes through the DHCP process to get an IP address for your Android, and then you can be connected to the BeeCorder, and usually that should come up with a prompt to sign in. If there is no prompt, you can always go to a web page and type in 192. 192.168.4.1. It's also printed on the case. And maybe you need to refresh it, but within about a minute, you should be able to access the web page that's being hosted by the ESP8266. From there, you'll see that its AP is a BeeCorder, and then also it's defined as the kind of roughly the firmware version that's installed there. This is June 2020. This uses a Wi-Fi manager, so you can do other things like get the info and find the MAC address in case you're tracking that as well, and then do a configure. And so this will bring up the web page for telling the ESP8266 what AP to go get an IP in future boots. So in my case, I'm going to this Lars24 AP, and then I have a password. Let me just type it in here. And then the ThinkSpeak channel and the ThinkSpeak Write API. So you might want to have this written out on a paper or some other information rather than searching through it, because in order to conserve power, the ESP8266 will have a timeout of about 10 minutes, of exactly 10 minutes. And so if all of this stuff is not entered in 10 minutes, the BeeCorder will go back to sleep for about 3 hours. You can always restart this process by power cycling it with the battery, but you do have about 10 minutes. The reason for that is that if you have a power outage and your AP, in this case, say the Lars24 is down, you don't want it to be wasting battery having this BeeCorder searching for hours on end. So it will go, if it doesn't find one, it will assume that there's, say, a power outage and go through this 3-hour deep sleep cycle, and every 3 hours it will wake up and try to get an IP address again. So here's the ThinkSpeak channel, and the reason it's already populated is because I have been messing around with this BeeCorder before, validating some things, and it has in Flash the ThinkSpeak channel and the ThinkSpeak Write API that I want to be posting from this BeeCorder. The next field down is the BeeCorder sleep time. This is the amount of minutes that you want it to be sleeping. The longer the sleep period, the better for battery life, obviously. And if you do sometimes want a more frequent reading, then reduce the time down to 1 minute. So the range is from 1 minute to 3 hours, or 180. Is that 180 minutes? Whatever. Okay, the next ones are a bit more tricky. So generally speaking, the weight scale factor is about 10,000 or 11,000. And it will be tested before it's sent out, but if you set this to a value that's not the same as the default, you will go into this weight scaling configuration factor. So if you're very interested in having a highly accurate, like within 1 pound of measurements, you'll want to set this, go through this configuration process, which takes some time. So in this case, we're going to be setting the scaling factor, and so the reason we do this, make this field accessible, is that as shipping goes through, your environment is going to have slightly different variations. Perhaps there's even altitude variations, I'm not sure. But then you can configure this at your site. It doesn't have to be underneath the beehive or anything like that, but just to make it as most accurate as possible, we can set the scaling factor in this manner. So right now, what you see is kind of what you might want to think of as a beehive base sitting here. Just as a note, the weight sensors that are underneath the steel here are sitting on some springboards. The springboards are sitting on a spacer so that they can be as accurate as so far we can find out. And so what I'm going to be doing is setting a weight scaling factor of 50 pounds. So I'm going to enter 50 pounds here, and that will, after I save, go into this weight scaling factor configuration mode. The weight offset is going to be determined automatically. And so in this case, previously it was an offset by 35 pounds, and so that will be reset when it is finished doing this scaling factor configuration. The final parameter is OTA, that's over-the-air updates. And it will allow you to force or push down a new firmware version, and it's rather complicated, so we're not going to go into that right now. But as long as you don't press and enter a Y in there, it will not go into that firmware configuration mode. Firmware update mode. Okay, so now we're going to save it, and it will save that configuration information to the ESP8266. And in 3 or 4 seconds, we should start seeing a slow blink. That slow blink, okay, there it is going to last for about a minute. And that is the time when we have to put the 50 pounds of weight on it. And so here we go. And just as a note, if you want as high accuracy as possible, you should let the wood, because right now what we've done is we've gone through the tar process already, and that tar process assumes 0 weight. I mean, that will include the little piece of wood here and the degree of wood compression that we have in the weight scale right now. So if you let this sit for maybe half an hour, that will give a higher accuracy of tar than if you were to just dump it on the board, dump it on and get going right away. So my suggestion is that you let this sit for tar for maybe half an hour, and then go through this process and put your weights on, and then it will go on to a high blink stage. And this will last for about 5 minutes, I think. It's a little bit variable because it's doing some averaging as well as it goes through. So it's not an exact 5 minutes, but the blinking, the faster blinking that you see right now will continue for about 5 minutes, and I'll probably clip that out of this video, but for completeness, I'm going to record the whole thing. And what this is doing is that at the end of the 5 minutes, it will say, okay, here we have a known 50-pound weight, and based on that, we can figure out the scaling factor that we will use until the next configuration cycle. So, okay, so it's finished doing the weight scale calibration. At the end, it will wake up and push out a piece of data that is usually erroneous. So one way to force a data push is to cycle the battery. There's one. And whenever you cycle the battery, you should see a small blink. Okay. Actually, I didn't see that one. There it is. And then about 10 seconds later, 12 seconds later, you'll see another blink indicating the upload to ThinkSpeak. Let's just wait for that a little bit. And yep, so that should be the push of data up to ThinkSpeak. If it doesn't succeed to ThinkSpeak, it will go into an SOS, like a slow 3-cycle blink, and then a fast 3-cycle, and then a slow 3-cycle blink. To indicate that it has not been able to reach ThinkSpeak. And that could be that either the API key was typed in incorrectly or some other. So here are the 2 data points that we just pushed. This first one, in the 10,000 range is the erroneous one after the cycle. But then with the 50 pounds, we had 49.73 pounds reading, and then a negative 0.3 reading for the oops, there's another one. That's another, see, we set it at every 1 minute, and so every minute it'll sample another one and post it. So that's some degree of confirmation. I mean, we're within a pound of accuracy. More accuracy probably would have been accomplished by letting it sit for longer periods of time, and other debates and so forth. Okay, so hopefully that explains how to set up the BeeCorder and configure the weight scaling factor. Thank you.